show event. I'm very happy to join today's Paysafe event. In a fireside chat with me, Christina, Roy Aston, who is our Chief Information Officer at Paysafe, will share how to be a conscious leader. I will try to ask various questions around that topic and try to learn more about the leadership experience he has. And hopefully we will take something home as an advice and my future growth. I really hope you would also join in a few questions at the end of the session. My colleagues will share a Slido code where you can ask your question and we'll try to answer them at the end. Before starting, let me introduce Roy. He joined Paysafe in February 2019 as Group Chief Officer. He is responsible for the global IT strategy, running 24/7 technology operations, our cybersecurity, and driving the transformation to the cloud-based payments platform. The most recent tech innovation that were launched under his leadership include our single API payment integration. We offer now embedded finance payment solution for all our clients and partners. Before joining Paysafe, Roy gained experience in IT and in FinTech. He has been part of high-profile global financial services like Barclays and Citi. He also has experience in UK-based FinTech Bank. In Barclays, he was accountable for all customer and merchant payment platforms for UK, Europe, and US. And he has also held senior roles in Citi, leading the business and technology transformation. And he has also a lot of extensive IT development skills gained at Bank. Welcome, Roy. I'm very honored to talk with you today. And I have one question that I wonder for quite a lot of time since you joined Paysafe. How did you start your career in the tech world?
Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join. That was a great intro as well. I learned something about myself during that intro, so thank you. Where did I start? I think my father was an engineer, not in technology, but he was in the electronics, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do as a career. I guess as a young boy, kind of like trying to figure out what career I wanted to do. I had no idea. It wasn't like I'd got a set path. And I always enjoyed engineering and spending time with my father, kind of building things, and that was going to be my natural route. I was going to go into electronics. And my dad brought me my first computer, and I just got interested in the computer and what it could do, and started to learn to program. It was I'm going to show my age now, but it was an old BBC microcomputer, so I learned BBC Basic and just started to write software, and that was it really. I kind of started writing software, got interested in what you could do and how you could kind of build things, and I guess almost from nothing create something of value, and then decided I'd study computing, and then ended up graduating with a degree in computer science, software engineering, and business, and then started to my career in writing software. So I started as an engineer, like many people have done, and I guess the rest therefore, as you so eloquently articulated, is history. So yeah, I started as an engineer and spent time very early on writing software.
I can very much relate to that. My father is also an engineer, but a mechanical one. So I think I had exactly the same experience with you, getting a computer and trying to write some program to make it a bit live. Really can relate to that. I remember when you joined in Paysafe in 2019. Actually, I was about 6 months already in the company. And I remember for your first visit in Sofia. You currently lead the technology organization, and our technology organization is a bit more than 1,500 people. Can you tell us a bit more about your role currently and what actually attracted you in the company?
Yeah, so I'll start a little bit about why I joined Paysafe. I mean, as I just mentioned, I mean, I've been in technology and engineering all my career, and actually financial services. So I have a sort of a passion and an interest for payments technology. I think it's such an interesting space. I think sort of fast evolving. The payments world is sort of, I guess it's kind of weird, right? I think many things in payments are very slow. So like payment methods, people still use checks, right? I remember 20 years ago as having a debate in my first job at Egg, and we were debating checks being phased out in 2 years. This is kind of like 20 years ago. So and people still use them. I guess sort of in the USA, people still pay for a lot of things, and in many places in UK and Europe, it's still a payment method, albeit less so. But so I think some payment trends are very slow to adapt. But then other things are really fast. Consumer expectation, kind of the use of mobile payments, wallets, kind of peer-to-peer payments, payment methods, crypto, right? So you've kind of got this weird sort of a dynamic happening where sort of long lasting payment trends, like in some of the payment instruments we know today about savings accounts, checking accounts, current accounts, mortgages, they're kind of very traditional methods, but then you've got these very fast changing dynamics. And I think that's kind of super interesting. And the opportunity for technology firms to innovate and digitalize and transform what is quite an archaic ecosystem. Like if you actually think about money movement and how even today in a digital world, some of the methods of money transfer and kind of things aren't 24/7 are very, very archaic. I think the ability to transform that is quite exciting. It's a huge opportunity. And for all of us, payments are, for most of our interactions, at the heart of everything that we do, right, in some way or another. So I think the space is interesting. So why Paysafe? I guess I'd spent time in my early career working for what was really a FinTech bank in the UK. I don't think we used to call it a FinTech bank, but we were like one of the first internet-only digital banks when everyone else was very traditional. So I spent my early years there and really loved working for that company. Very fast-paced, very innovative, pushing the boundaries of technology and payments at the time. And then got to spend a number of years with Citi and Barclays, and actually had a great time there as well. I mean, really learned to adapt to working in a big organization. Very different working with 3,000 people in a company to like Citi was like 160,000, Barclays was about 80,000 when I joined, a bit smaller when I left. And how to operate in those organizations is very different. So enjoyed my time there, but got to a point in Barclays where I felt I'd achieved a lot and wanted to do something different, and had a desire to go back to a smaller organization, perhaps a little bit more, in my view, kind of nimble, kind of pushing the boundaries in payments a little bit more. And I sort of met with Paysafe many years before our paths had crossed, and I got to reconnect with our HR director and meet up with the team here, and just to happen to be an opportunity, and kind of the sort of the planets all aligned, and there was a chance for me to join, which was sort of a good opportunity for me to be part of the executive team. So an opportunity to influence the strategy of the company as much as being the kind of the person who looked after technology, but also a big role in tech. Like how do we expand? How do we think about global markets? How do we integrate? So I think it was just an exciting opportunity and the right fit for me personally.
That's really great. And Roy, you're currently a CIO. You have grown your career. You mentioned you started as an engineer. I wonder what helped you to get where you are today. What was the most beneficial thing throughout your journey to that position that you can share as a growth path for me as a growing leader?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess how did I get here? I mean, I never had an aspiration to be the CIO, right? That's not where I started. It wasn't like I started as an engineer and kind of like, right, I need to be the kind of the big technology chief and look after everything. That's kind of not how I was driven or motivated. But I think I started off like I was an individual contributor, so I was like a person in the team writing software, and I really had a desire to. I wanted to write the best software, right? Use the fewest line of code, right? Use the right design patterns. How did I automate the build? Kind of we were really pushing the boundaries of extreme programming when it was an early methodology. So my career started off extreme programming, kind of a variation of kind of agile development when a lot of companies weren't even doing that. So we were kind of like, I was naturally kind of hardwired from an early stage to kind of push the boundaries and think about fast iterative value creation for businesses. And I kind of became quite successful in that. So I then sort of progressed from being an individual contributor to a manager saying, well, hey, why don't you manage, like, why don't you kind of be the engineering lead for one of the teams, a team of 5? And then it became like, well, I started running 3 sprint teams as we were kind of thinking about scaling the kind of the agile stuff out. And then before I know, I was running all of our internet and mobile development. And it just one thing led to another. And I kind of started to carve out a bit of a niche of being able to understand the engineering side of things, but really have a passion for the business and understanding. I really wanted to understand how the business operated. And the more I understood how the business operated, the more I understood the problems in the business and how technology could solve them. So I continued to progress my career and getting promoted and promoted and promoted. Not because I was necessarily the best technical person, but because I'd found a niche which was allowing me to engage with the business, talk to them in language they understood, which was kind of about solutions and commercials and problems for the business and how we could grow the business. But then I managed to bridge back and go back to technology, and I got to a point where I got sort of to run the whole engineering community. Then I was at a fork in my career, because fast you realize that there were a lot of people working for me. I was no longer the smartest engineer. I wasn't writing software enough to stay relevant, whilst I understood what people were talking about and I could kind of challenge them in terms of design and kind of solutioning and architecture. You fast realize, because you're not doing this stuff day to day, you're not practicing it. I got to make a decision. I either needed to go back into engineering and write software like day to day and try and be the smartest engineer I could be, or continue down the management path, because I was starting to kind of become more of a manager. And there was a fork in the road, and I decided that my desire to understand technology at quite a detailed level, but my passion to work with people, both on the business and get the best out of the engineering team, was what really excited me. So I made the decision to become sort of a technical people leader. And the more and more I progressed that, actually, the more I moved away from writing software, and I had to make a decision that wasn't the path I became. So then I went down more of a managerial path, and I guess started to develop an interest in developing people. Like, how could I develop and build the best teams? How could I get the best out of people? How could I develop a real passion for empowering and enable individuals to be successful? And that's kind of where I then just continued with more of a management career. And then for me, it was about diversifying, gaining experience in different environments, different roles, becoming adaptable and flexible. And then just one day I ended up becoming like a CIO. It just kind of was just a natural progression for me in the next managerial career, but it was never a kind of a hard and fast goal.
Understood. I can very much relate to what you mentioned. I think that one of the big lessons that I learned as part of my career was also that I would never be the smartest guy in the room, and I can never be a really good engineer and a technical guy once you move to the management role, right?
I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room. I can say that, definitely.
Yeah, and as we're talking about lessons and stuff that we learn as we grow, what are the biggest career lessons that you have learned through that journey? And actually, how they shaped you as a conscious leader?
Well, I think a number of things that probably, I mean, we sort of touched on it just a little bit. I mean, as soon as you realize you're not the smartest person in the room, I think it unlocks an ability for you to be successful. So my job today is not to try and kind of know everything and understand everything. You just can't, right? I think your job is to leverage and empower individuals and make them successful, and to kind of pool the collective assets of an experience and knowledge and expertise of all of the people you work with, both as people that work for me and as peers. And I think as soon as you realize that you can get a lot from people if you take time to invest in them, understand what drives and motivates them, and that sort of leveraging their expertise and their experience is the key to success, I think it kind of allows you to progress. So I think realizing you're not the smartest person and you need to build a team around you of really smart people is one of the things I learned. I think secondly, what I learned quite quickly is that kind of people look up to you as a leader more than you think. I think you kind of, somebody said to me a while back, like, be very conscious about the shadow you cast as a leader. And it's hard. I mean, you kind of like, you're always on show, and people interpret cues and signals that you make, and it impacts them, and it can impact them more than you think. So whether it's like, as you walk out the lift, you don't say hi to somebody in the morning, like they might interpret that as, well, kind of, does Roy like me anymore, or maybe I've done a bad job or something like that. And it's not always that stuff, but you have to be very aware of the kind of the things that you say, the things that you do, and how people interpret them, because a lot of people look up to you as somebody who's creating the vision and driving the organization before, and they kind of mirror and match your behaviors as well. So I think you've got to be aware of the culture you want to create and how you have to operate. So I think that's important. And then I think secondly, I think the ability to be adaptable and to try out new things. I think the more you push yourself outside your comfort zone, the more you develop as an individual. I remember early on in my career when I moved to out of Egg into perhaps more in Barclays than City, but I'd inherited quite a large team, and part of the role was to be on stage and present, right? And you had to, like, people were looking at you, like, if you were confident on stage and you could articulate yourself. And I used to hate it. I mean, the day before, I'd have to go on stage, like physically on stage, like in a big auditorium with lots of people watching on video. I'd kind of feel physically sick, and I kind of wouldn't sleep the night before, and I'd kind of be stressing about everything. Like, what if I say something that makes me look like an idiot, and kind of like, if I look awkward, how's that going to come across, right? And I still worry about that stuff now, but the more you practice it, the more you get comfortable at stuff. So I think you've got to push yourself. That's just one example for me, very personal example for me, of how something that I felt very difficult, you kind of have to do, and you have to practice, and you have to learn and get feedback. So I think sort of as a leader, you've got to be vulnerable, be able to push yourself out of your comfort zone and do new things. And then you become more adaptable, more flexible, and then more able to take on different challenges. And that can be different for different people. For some people, it might be going and experiencing working in a different market, or trying a different role, or learning something new outside of work. But being able to push yourself and learn, I think, it makes you a more dynamic individual and a more competent and able leader. And then I think the final thing is just connecting with people on a real personal level. I think you all know, if you've worked with a leader that takes an interest in you, not just an interest in what you do. And the people that you remember the people that you've worked with more than you remember the work you do. And I think the people that you remember and have an influence on you personally are those individuals that took time to invest with you. And I've been really lucky that throughout my career, I've been able to work with some phenomenal leaders, and I put my career trajectory down to them as an individual. They put me into roles that I didn't feel I was ready for, but they had trust and confidence in me and supported me. They pushed me out of my comfort zone more than I thought I was probably ready. So I think I'm very grateful to them for doing that. And I think sort of, I always feel that I have to pay back a little bit and try and do that with others to help develop their career. And I think sort of your ability to connect with people, understand them, understand what motivates them, take time to understand who's in their family or their close circle of friends, what we've done at the weekend, like having a connection with people helps create a much stronger team dynamic. And then ultimately, I mean, it makes it a great place to work if you can relate to people and get on with them really well, but it also creates a better business outcome.
You touch base so many topics, and many of my favorite topics around engagement, as you mentioned, a relationship to people, and culture. I'm very interested to understand a bit more about your mechanics, how you actually build the right culture for your organization, and being based on motivation, engagement, and openness.
Well, some of the team are on the line. You should probably ask them if I've created the right culture. They'll probably have some feedback, positive and negative. I think the culture that I think you create is based around a set of core values, and those core values are twofold for me. One, I mean, we have corporate values at Paysafe, and I genuinely think they're the right values. Sort of, I think they resonate with me, and I think they set the right tone. But I think then you have your own personal values, right? So, for me, a lot of the values that I have, and I try and demonstrate. I'm sure I don't do them all of the time, but I try and do 99% of the time. I really think it's the core to my beliefs, like treating people with respect. We touched on some of the things about I try and take time to invest in people. So I try to run the team that we have in a way that's not very hierarchical. So I sort of, doesn't matter what role you're in. I don't want people to necessarily work through the layers. So short circuit the distance from the most junior person to kind of, I guess, the most senior person in the organization. How do you make people feel like it's not hierarchical, that there's kind of people have different roles and different tenure, but it's not, you don't have to kind of necessarily work through that. I think having fun in the environment, I think it's good to, we spend a lot of time with people that are at work, and I think therefore actually sort of being able to enjoy the time that you spend with each other is hugely important. I think I talked about trust, but treating people with respect. And then I think I think the culture has to be one of challenge, right? I mean, we come to work. I mean, we all come to work because I'm sure nobody here is doing it for free. If you are, thank you. But I'm sure we all like to get financially remunerated, but we all like to get challenged, right? We're doing it because we want to work in, like for me, in technology, and we like the industry we're in. So you don't just want to do mundane, repeatable work. I think most people want to do something that challenges them. So I think for us, over the last, like since 2019, as I joined here, we've tried to push the boundaries of kind of like almost to things that are, I wouldn't say impossible, but are stretch goals. Like, how do we really shift the technology? How do we go from very unstable, brittle, siloed platforms? How do we really build an ecosystem of payment technology that allows the business to move forward? How do we push the boundaries of enabling people to kind of train, learn new skills, become skilled in new technologies, cloud, data, and leverage them to deploy things? So I think if you create a culture of trust, enablement, empowerment, one where you can challenge yourself, you can learn new things, new skills, new things about the world that you live in, and you can have some fun, and then you do all of that and you get remunerated for that in a way that is acceptable and something that you like. I think you start to create a great culture.
Thank you very much for that answer. I can say that everything you described is how our organization actually works. We have great number of challenges, and also we have the power to be open. We have a lot of values around openness and proposing solutions and actually working on these challenges. So I very much liked your description of the culture that you're trying to build, because you have managed to do that in our organization. And as we're talking about culture and organizations, and actually you have managed to build that, what do you think are the most important skills for an expiring leader as you in a technology organization?
Being good at technology, maybe. I'm being flippant, but I guess there's an element. So as a leader, I think there are skills you need as a leader that are different to skills you need as a technology leader. And that question is quite hard to answer because I think technology now is very different, right? We talk about this a lot in the context of D&I, right? The stereotypical roles of technology of kind of 20, 30 years ago, where it was kind of people hacking away on punch cards or mainframe computers in these kind of rooms, is like those days have gone, right? Technology is such a broad world where it's everything from design and graphics and UI and UX to project management to business analysis to strategy to actually engineering, and engineering is so broad as well, right? So the roles are so diverse. So I think I think trying to sort of carve out what the skill sets are of a technology leader is really hard because it's going to depend on what it is you're doing. But so I think the skill sets I think you need as a technology leader is kind of like the generic leadership stuff and then specific stuff. I think wherever you specialize in technology, I think if you're going to be a good leader, you need to understand the business that you're in, right? So it's no good being in payments and payments technology if you actually have no appreciation of what the business is. So how the business operates, who's its competition, what's the competition doing, kind of what should be the vision for us, how should we be moving forward, what's the next evolution of payments technology, kind of like what should we be doing, what should we be thinking about. So I think you have to be able to be sort of as a leader, you have to be contextually aware of the environment that you work in to be able to have a debate, right? It's not about necessarily being the smartest person in the room, but you have to be able to sort of understand or at least have an appreciation so you can challenge and have a debate and form opinions and make decisions. So I think that's important, and therefore I think sort of almost goes back to the technology piece, your desire to continuously learn, right? Today's world isn't just a case of, right, I can be a one-trick pony in technology. You've got to be able to be dynamic, you've got to be adaptable and change. And I think that desire to learn, that passion to want to be curious and learn and develop is important. So I think those are sort of more technology traits. Then, I mean, we've covered some of the things as a leader. I think your ability to be empathetic, to be genuinely interested in people, to sort of think about the broader needs. I mean, kind of how do you build a diverse team, right? In the sense of being able to bring together different diverse aspects of, in the broadest aspect of diversity, to kind of bring together different views and opinions. You want a team that is going to be leveraging so many different strengths and opinions. And I think creating a vision, you want to be inspired by the leaders that you work for. So I think it doesn't have to always be right, but I think you have to have an opinion. Like, how do you create a vision that people go, right, I can see where we're heading. I may not agree with it, and let's have that debate if I don't, but I can see where we're heading and why. And that's kind of like, how do you create that why, so that people go, right, I understand my role, I understand what I need to do to be successful, I understand how I can progress. So I think that are probably some of the core things I would point out.
And Roy, you mentioned, and it is very true that our industry, the tech industry, and also the FinTech industry, which Paysafe operates in, are very famous for being, as you mentioned, very dynamic, very fast-paced. You can't just stay at one place. You always need to be challenged by being able to move faster than that we need. What do you think are the biggest leadership opportunities in that area, both tech and fintech?
Well, I think it depends on what you want to do as an individual. I mean, look, I think if we think about the context outside of Paysafe, I mean, like, I think what's exciting about the trend that's happened in fintech is, like, if you go back 20 years ago, right, the only people, the individuals that would have been successful are big companies in payments. Like you'd have found big technology. It's like your JP Morgans, your Barclays, your Citigroups, your Goldman Sachs, right? Suddenly FinTech appeared, and you've got all of these companies that are primarily ideating and innovating in the consumer experience space. So they were taking what were traditionally clunky customer experiences, and they were solving real pain points for consumers, which was consumers becoming more savvy in a more digitally online world, a more mobile aware world, and were becoming less accommodating for bad service and poor experience, right? So you suddenly have all of these fintechs that are exploding, solving problems in the experience space, and then that evolved to fintechs becoming banks. But suddenly you've got very young, well, and old, but like young individuals becoming CEOs and entrepreneurs of businesses that like historically weren't possible. So I think that the thing that's exciting now about kind of fintech and technology and the world in general is there are no limits. Like the rules of the game have been completely rewritten, right? Yeah, you can be one person, two people kind of setting up a business from a very young age. Like if you're clear on the problem you're solving, you found a niche, actually it's become much more accessible for individuals to become hugely successful in their own right, running their own businesses. And you see many, many use cases of individuals that have gone on, may not be their first time, but second, third business in technology that they've created and becoming very, very successful. Equally, again, I think people can be very successful in companies like ours or even the big giants, right? I mean, there are so many different career paths and opportunities, and digital transformation is not going to go away. I mean, the explosion of digital transformation. People were talking about this pre-COVID, like financial services and technology was always big. Digital transformation was huge pre-COVID, but then got sort of rocket propelled, and that continued trend of sort of digitization in adjacencies, whether it be sort of insurance tech or like payment tech, or kind of now when you think about crypto and the metaverse, there are so many opportunities. So actually, I think there are no boundaries or limits anymore for individuals. Kind of the limits of your leadership potentially become more about your ability to be creative and think about what you want to do rather than the world itself. I don't think the world necessarily has constraints like it had historically. I think the constraints then become self-imposed. So your ability to have self-confidence, your ability to progress, I think those become the more limiting factors. And I think as talent management becomes the biggest challenge for companies like us. We have lots of really progressive, dynamic leaders now, and finding opportunities to develop them, give them opportunities, make them feel like they're developing their career is the challenge for people like myself. Because if we don't do that, then these individuals will find somewhere else to go and do it. They won't just hang around and accept and compromise and take second best. They'll go somewhere else and do it. So I think that this new dynamic creates a challenge for organizations like ours.
You very much described what actually is motivating me most in the tech area, and why I joined the tech world and the IT world. Yeah, you mentioned developing talent. I would be a bit selfish here and would mention developing women, as we all know that gender diversity and diversity as a whole is very important for an organization to be really successful. You recently pilot women development program within Paysafe. I'm very honored to be part of that program, and wanted to ask you about some examples, what you do on that hidden part, your personal part, and how do you focus on building talent?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I've said this before, I mean, I think I have a real personal challenge. I've shared this with the team a number of times because I passionately believe that we've got to continue to address the not just the diversity challenges globally, but specifically technology. Right? It's been a very undiverse industry for many years. And that's from the ground up when you think of like STEM-based education. And I talk about the stereotypes of technology. I still feel that they, in some ways, play a role into why there's not such an inflow of really diverse candidates into technology from the ground up. But it troubles me, and it's embarrassing actually when I talk about sponsoring these programs when I have the all-male technology leadership group. So that's something I spend a lot of time with my team, with the HR team, to look at how I can change that and all the opportunities. And when there are opportunities, we've got to really push the boundaries harder to make sure that we are not promoting people with a bias. And the reason I sponsored the We Lead program is because there is an issue, or I perceive there is an issue in Paysafe, because whilst we aren't 50-50 in terms of our inflow of candidates, we are at least comparative to some of the big technology fintechs in the market, which is encouraging, but is still not good enough. So we still need to work on getting a better flow of balanced and diverse candidates into the organization. But there is a drop off, right, when you move into more leadership roles. And that's not acceptable, right? That says to me that for some reason, there is a bias somewhere, or people aren't giving an equal opportunity when it gets to leadership roles. That's either because sort of individuals are not selecting candidates in a fair way, or because people aren't putting themselves forward for roles. It could be either. So my intent with the We Lead program was not to try and some people have said this before, it is not a program that kind of prioritizes women's progression over men's progression, right? That's not right as well. And women would not want that to be the ambition of the program at all in any way, right? So we're not trying to sort of do any adverse selection. What we're trying to do is for individuals that want to, so we're not forcing people into the program, for those individuals that really have a passion and interest and want to progress their career, we're trying to work with those individuals in a bi-directional way, right? We're trying to help provide skills, training, 360 feedback, development, sponsorship, so those individuals feel like they can put themselves forward for opportunities, so that they get more visibility and more profile and get consideration for when opportunities come up. But also that we learn, right? We spent time yesterday, me and my management team, listening to some feedback from the program so that we can understand where there may be challenges, like what are the potential biases, how do we make this more an inclusive environment? So that's why I created that program, because one, I think it's an important program to me. I genuinely believe in diversity creates a better environment. It not only creates a better environment and a more inclusive place to work, but it creates a better business outcome as well. So it's good all round. But I think we have some issues in Paysafe, not massive, right? But I think we have still work to do. And I think this program is exactly the right thing to help progress and look for talent internally, and to educate the organization about how we become a better environment. We still have work to do. So that's why I created the program. And it's cohort 1. So look, I mean, we've still got a lot to do. I think we've got 9 people on cohort 1. So it's a very small representation of the overall organization, but we'll continue to do more and more. And I think feedback is positive so far. We'll develop a second cohort and do more and more.
I would say that before I joined the program, I had a lot of role models in the organization that were male representatives. And after joining the program, despite being just a very short time, and we actually are in the prep stage of the program, I found out quite a few female leaders as role models and being inspirational for me, which is really, really fantastic. And saying that, I can't help but ask you, do you have a role model yourself, regardless the gender? And do you have a leader that has inspired you a lot?
No, I've been asked this question a lot. I mean, some people have these kind of big figurehead role model leaders that they like up to these big celebrity names, and I don't particularly that. But I've had as I said, I've had the opportunity to work in my career for some phenomenal leaders. Actually, on balance, when you look at my leaders that I've worked for directly, I've spent probably 70% of my time working for female leaders and 30% time working for male leaders. And actually all of them, I've been massively lucky. All of them, without exception, have played a huge part in my self-development, my confidence, my career development. I owe a huge amount of gratitude to them. And all of them I stay in contact with today. So it's not like I have a role model, but actually the one thing they all had in common is they took time to invest in me, understand me, believe in me, push me, and put me into other roles. So I think sort of I guess my role model thing is I sort of want to be more like they were and have the impact on other people that they had on me. And I stay in contact with all of them today. I use them all as sort of mentors. If I have a particularly challenging work experience or something I just need their advice on, I'll call some of them up and say, hey, can we just talk through this, and what would you do? And we stay in close contact, all of them, which has been great. So no big celebrity figurehead leader, but definitely definitely more on a personal level. I guess I've been very lucky and gifted to work with the people I have.
I'm very inspired by what you said. I would say for me personally, I've been on the both sides, having that big figure, but also staying close to people I've worked, so I can learn a lot from them and their new experiences. Right, I'll move the topic to a bit more personal level, as every leader is struggling with some challenges. I recently had a talk about leadership challenges that we faced, and one thing that I didn't touch base very slightly in my presentation was about work-life balance and stress. And I always wonder, leaders at your position, they should have a lot of stress to cope with. What are your tips and tricks that help you cope with the stress?
Well, I think the first thing is there's no reason I should have any more stress than anyone else, right? Or I think there's this sort of perception of, well, you get higher in an organization and you're more stressed and you have to work more hours. I mean, that's kind of like that's not the way it is, and that's the way it should be. I mean, there's no reason that I should be any more stressed than you have your pressures working and having tight deliverables and timelines to work for, and that can stress you out just as much as it like the different dynamic pressures that I've got would stress me out. So and I don't think necessarily this is sort of one of those things that people assume, I've got to work harder and longer when I get to a different role. Like your role, like the reason I do what I do is because of my experience and the value I can bring, not because I can work an hour longer a day than you, right? So I think that's a perception that I'm really keen to break down. Going back to the previous topic of talent progression and diversity, I've heard some people go, I couldn't possibly take on the next role because I'm a mother or a father of kids and I kind of have to get home in the evening and do bedtime. I'm like, you still can, right? I mean, I have kids and I sometimes like to see them. So I like to get back and see them as well. Sometimes I don't when they annoy me, but most of the time I do like to spend time with them. But look, I think it's hard. I mean, I'm in London today. London is a 2.5 hour commute for me. So like by the time I finished up today, I'll be back later, and like it's sort of harder to be part of the family. I stayed down last night in London, so I was away from home, and sometimes I travel. Like I part of the job is that I travel around. And that has pressures, and everyone has to figure out how they can manage that within their own personal situation. But I have some fairly strict rules about how I work and what I do. And you know what, if I've been away for a few days, I'll make sure I carve time out my diary to have breakfast with my wife and my kids, or my wife and I'll go and walk our dog together, or like tomorrow morning after being here all week, I'm going to go home tonight. And tomorrow morning, it'll be early. I'll get up early, but I'm going to go for a run with my kind of my running mates, and we'll go out for a run, and then kind of I'll start work like a little bit later and get onto stuff. Now, I think equally, then I'll work late into the evenings on other days. So there's flexibility in the role. If I work away or if I've been away in the week, I have quite hard boundaries about what I do on the weekend. It doesn't mean I won't respond to an odd email here and there. But but you know what, I kind of take time to be with the kids if I've been away. So I think you need your time. You have to set your boundaries and you have to figure out what is and isn't acceptable at any level, because work is a high pressure environment for everyone. And there's a risk, if you're not careful, that you work all hours. And I think you have to define what your boundaries are, define what's important to you. What's important to me is being a dad, having my own free time and exercising, spending time with my wife, and as a family, like, how do I carve that time out? And that time's important, right? It's really important. You can't look back in a month's time and go, oh, I didn't have time to spend with the family. The only person you've got to blame is yourself, because you accepted that meeting, kind of, you went onto that call, and you could have chosen to say no, or you could have chosen to do your email at a different time. So I think figuring out what your boundaries are is super important. And then that goes back to your core values. Some of those are core values to me. And at times when people that really know me, the times when I'm under stress is when those core values get pressured. So if things are compromising into the time that I've decided to set aside for the kids, then I start feeling stressed, right? Because it's like, that's part of my core values and that stresses me out. So I think you have to, like, those that work very closely with me will know some of the boundaries and how I operate. And it isn't a case of, no, sometimes I'll send emails late at night or on weekends, and you'll see me sending emails at all hours. Normally that's because I'm traveling. It's because it's a convenient time for me to do it, not because I want people to respond. So I think we have to try and make sure that the dynamics of the organization understand, and they're respectful of everyone else's situation. But it's not always easy. My wife will probably tell you that sometimes I get it wrong as well.
I'm sure about the last part. I would say that that's the advice from today's talk that I'm going to take home, as I have a lot to work on my boundaries. So I'm writing down everything you said. And as we're talking about boundaries and talking about challenges, can you share what's the hardest decision you have made as a leader?
Look, there are always tough decisions. I mean, look, every decision it's very unusual that a decision is black and white, right? There are always shades of grey, and there are consequences. I mean, I think it's always worse not to make a decision. Indecision is kind of the biggest enemy, because I think I was talking to somebody today, and we were saying, look, I've had times where you have these gut instincts and you kind of like go against them, and they kind of prove to be wrong, right? Sometimes you kind of just know you need to do something, and like, you know, sometimes you'll trying to make a decision that'll trouble you, and you kind of like defer it, or deal with that tomorrow. And a lot of time these things don't age well, right? Making decisions and moving forward is better than not making a decision at all. But look, I like to believe that one of my core values is getting to know people and working with people. And unfortunately, I think one of the things that always troubles me is, one of the hardest things about being a leader is sometimes you need to make tough choices about how you structure the teams, right? Business dynamics change, and that means people's roles change, and kind of you end up having to deal with underperformance, or maybe it's not always underperformance. Maybe you just have to change the organization. And that's hard when you've connected with people personally and they become friends, and kind of, so trying to find a way in a leadership role of separating the personal, because that's important. You want to build that relationship and trust with people, but also you are making decisions for the business, and you've got to make sure you've got the right team around you. And sometimes great people aren't always the right people to have in the team, and your job as a leader is to make sure that you're staying focused on that vision. And that always troubled me. That kind of, you go back to what stresses me out, those things stress me out, right? So making difficult people decisions, even if I know they're the right things to do, trouble you. And all leaders at some point, if you're managing people, inherently at times, I guarantee at some point in your people management career, there's going to be difficult individuals you have to deal with, or they may not be difficult individuals, but you have to make difficult decisions in the right interest of the business. And that can be hard and very unpleasant. And I think that's really hard. I still struggle with that now.
I can relate to that, though I haven't had the experience you have, but I can very much relate to that. And as we are progressing with the time, I would move to the piece of advice that you would give to every employee at Paysafe um, in terms of growing as a leader? What that advice would be?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to want to be a leader, right? There's no point in growing as a leader and having these aspirations or getting over promoted, right? So if you look as a technologist, some people just want to write really good code. They don't want to manage people and lead teams. So my first bit of advice would be be really sure you want to be a leader first. And if you don't, that's also fine. People can have really good roles, really big roles, really challenging roles, but they don't have to necessarily manage people. But I think as you do manage people, I think it's that, go back to the point I made earlier about take time to understand the individual motivations, kind of what are people doing? How do you get the best out of the team? How do you listen? Like sort of taking time. A lot of people like to fill the air gap with conversation, and sometimes you just need to not say anything. It's kind of quite a powerful thing, and just to listen to individuals. And then I think go back to my earlier point. I think be curious. I think the more you can be flexible, the more you can learn, the more you can sort of learn from others, the good and the bad, the more you will become a better leader and individual, and be very conscious about the impact you have on others. So that would be my summary comments of how to be a good leader. And then don't follow me. I'm not sure. Ask my team whether I'm a good leader or not.
I can definitely say that at the moment, I think there is a lot in you that is good to be thought, especially with everything you shared during this conversation. I would ask Harisi to help me whether we have additional questions in Slido from the audience.
I believe the link is in the chat for everyone that wants to ask a question.
The sun is blinding behind me, burning a hole through the. So apologies for the reflection behind.
At the moment, there is a question. I would start with it, and it's also related to the previously touched topic about diversity. How do you think gender diversity relates to genuine diversity?
How do I think gender relates to genuine diversity?
How gender diversity relates to genuine diversity for you?
Well, look, I think I think part of, other than thinking about diversity in its broadest lens and inclusion, is just the right thing to do on a human level. If you think about it in a business context, we operate in a diverse world. Our consumers, our merchants, the people that we're delivering products and services for are diverse in nature. So I think it stands to reason that having a workforce that is diverse in all aspects, right, in its broadest sense. I mean, we talk about gender here, and I think it tends to be the kind of one of the leading things people focus on because it's easier to measure globally than some of the other elements of diversity, which can be harder in some countries to actually get stats on. So it's easier to sort of measure that, and it tends to be one of the more leading things people focus on. But diversity in general is important, right? We work with, and our customers and clients are more diverse. It stands to reason that having a work environment that allows people to bring different perspectives from different cultures and backgrounds, etc., is going to allow us to build better products and services and deliver a better business outcome. So I think from a business perspective, it makes sense. And then, as I said, from a human level, right, we live in a world that you interact and have experience with different people on all levels, and I think therefore it's just the right thing to do as a human being to create an environment that isn't skewed to any particular aspect and is diverse in nature.
Absolutely. The questions are piling up, so I'll not waste time for the next one. What is the first programming language which you have learned?
My first programming language. So I guess, well, I mentioned it earlier. I mean, my very first programming language was BBC Basic. So I kind of got a BBC microcomputer, big, horrible, massive plastic cream computer, connect to this huge, big, deep monitor, and then quickly moved on to C, C++, Java, and spent kind of, I guess, my early egg days building kind of EJBs in Java. I don't even think they're a thing anymore, but there you go. That was my early career in Java.
Nice. And what was the biggest challenge you had to deal with over the last 2 years during the pandemic?
I think the biggest challenge, well, reconnecting with my family. I guess being at home and getting under my wife's feet was the biggest challenge. But no, I think I think probably three. I mean, I think from a business perspective, it was tough. I mean, you remember we had to make some really hard decisions to protect the business. And that was hard as an executive team. So that wasn't a technology challenge. That was as a sort of a senior leader in the organization. We had to think about how we protected the business and had to make some very tough choices. Go back to the previous point. I think we were decisive. We knew we were doing them for the right reasons, and I think that helped protect jobs and it helped protect the overall organization. So COVID, and the challenge with COVID was, like, once we got through the first 2 or 3 months of kind of, well, this is just a kind of a thing that's going to go away, and it clearly wasn't. The question then was, well, when's it going to go away? It was so unpredictable. So trying to make decisions as an executive team and for the business on how we think about managing the business going forward was really hard, because nobody had been through this before, right? You've got no history, no context. So you're trying to make decisions with no frame of reference. So I think that was really hard. We were learning all the time, like, how are people going to react to payments? Like, what's going to happen? You know, are they still going to use our products? So that was really tough. And I think the second bit was just we all had to learn very quickly to operate in a world where we were no longer physically connected. So, like, how do I engage with my team? How do I create the same dynamic? My team and I used to get together at least once a month physically, and then suddenly we're all remote, right? We're all kind of in these little 1 by 1 inch square boxes on the screen. And how do we not just transact? How do we engage? And I think we learned very quickly how to run the business and how to create new normals, to the point where people now seem to prefer interacting in this way than they do physically sometimes. But it is nice to get that balance. But I think we sort of trying to maintain a balance going forward where we leverage some of the benefits that we had, like a little bit more time, a little bit more free time, where you're kind of not always commuting. And but I think also we do need to physically interact again. And it's kind of great when you meet back up with people and there's a different energy. So getting the balance right now is so important.
I really want to iterate a bit about the interaction. So we'll pause for a moment this little question and we'll let myself ask you. Do you think we really miss today the personal interaction, or after 2 years of the pandemic being working, actually want to work in that environment, and we will never be again having desks next to each other, talking everything over face to face?
I think it's very.
How do you feel the world is going?
I think it's very personal, right? I mean, you know, the sort of world where you've got introverts and extroverts, right? The extroverts are going to get their energy from being with people, right? That social interaction helps give them their core energy. So, look, I think if you're an extroverted individual, being isolated at home is going to be really hard. So I think your desire then to be back in the office or back in an environment, doesn't have to be an office, but an environment where you interact with people on a more physical level is going to be much stronger than someone that's more extreme on the introvert scale, right? You've got everyone in between. So I think it's going to be a very personal experience for everyone. I can only speak for myself, which is I'll probably sit on that scale somewhere in the middle, which is like, I like my time. I like my sort of reflection time on my own. I sort of like the fact sometimes that sort of working remotely has enabled me to kind of bring things back in my life that were a bit more challenging because of the commute before. But I also get a lot of energy from being with people. I've had my leadership team with me for the last 2 days off site. It's been great. I mean, the trouble with the video call is you tend to do what you need to do in your 30-minute, 1-hour slot, and you become very transactional. I think we all became very transactional, and go back to some of the points I talked about leadership-wise. I think people tend to understand about families and weekends, and you connect on that personal level a lot more in a physical environment. You bump into people when you're in the sort of the coffee area, in the kitchen area, going to get a coffee, and you'll chat to them. Like, you don't do that in a home environment. Like, not many people were phoning people up on video, just going, "Hey, I've got 5 minutes to spare. I just thought I'd phone you up for a chat." It doesn't typically happen in that more transactional online world. So I think the answer to the question is hard, because it depends on who you are and what you're like as an individual. But I think the majority of the people that I've met actually who are back in the office enjoy being together. They say how great it's been meeting with people, bumping into people, chatting on a work and a personal level. But they still also like the fact that, you know, they can get that balance back in their life. So I think we're still learning a lot. We're still learning a lot about how the world will normalize sort of post-COVID and what the new norms of hybrid working will actually settle down to be over time.
Yep, absolutely. So back to Slido questions. What is the most important thing that you look for in an HR professional supporting you?
A HR professional.
HR professional.
Need to look. Is Elena on the call? She must have asked that. I think. Look, I think 2 things. One, everyone that sort of is part of my team, whether it's my directs or the extended team, I want to be part of the team. So for me, somebody who's a HR professional needs to take an interest in the team, right? So as technology, they need to understand what we're working on, why we're working on stuff. Like, they have to have context, because if they understand the context, then they can more appropriately advise us on HR related topics around people, talent, succession. They can help me develop programs like We Lead, and we can select the right people for front runner and all those other things that we do to develop talent. So I think look, I think it's really I'm sort of assuming that if somebody's in HR, I trust the fact that I can't really check out their credentials, right? I sort of know that if they're in the team, like the HR team will have validated that their skill set is excellent. I guess my validation will be, what I'd really look for is them engaging in the team, helping us kind of build the right talent, helping us really understand how we get the right people in the right locations with the right skill sets, so that we build the best team we can possibly have to achieve the challenges that we have ahead of us.
And leaders, and how do you promote career conversation? That's the next question in Slido, and very much in what you're just describing.
You broke up a little bit then, but I think you said, how do I promote career conversations?
Yep. The next question is Slido is very much the same topic, as well as programs. How do you ensure a pipeline of future leaders?
Yep.
And how do you promote career conversations?
Well, I think there's multiple parts to that. So my leadership team and I spend a lot of time, right, at least once every 2 months, if not more frequently, we talk about the talent that's in the team and how they're progressing and opportunities, and we look at succession. So I look for who could be my successor. Like, do I have somebody that's ready to be in my role? Like, if for some reason I'm not here. And then how deep do we go, and where have we got gaps, right? So how are we looking sort of all the way down through as many levels as we can go? Who's ready now? Like, so who's ready now for the job? Who's ready in 1 to 2 years? Who's ready 2 years out? So we start to look at like who's the talent, and that can be a very much a view of who do we think is in that role, but then you have to match that with the ambition, right? Somebody might be wanting or able to do that, but obviously do they have the desire and do they have the ambition? So that's a dialogue that my team and I have very, very frequently. So we have that discussion. I think career then development conversations on a personal level, I always think these are two-way, right? So I mean, managers need to take an interest in developing their teams. And that's kind of part of the manager or the leader's job to do. But individuals should also be accountable for their own career. I mean, you can't just sit there and go, well, my manager didn't have a career conversation with me, so I'm kind of like, oh, what do I do, right? That's not a good answer either. It goes back to the time management point, right? Nobody else is going to say to you, well, hey, how about you kind of like don't book that meeting at 4 p.m. on Friday, right? Just kind of like, you've got to, if you don't want to book that meeting at 4 p.m. or you don't want to attend it because you've got to go and pick your kids up from school or whatever, you just have to not book it, right? Or like decline the meeting. So I think it's the same with career development. Like, you've got to take ownership of your own career development. And if you're not having those conversations with your manager, push your manager, get a mentor, kind of take ownership of your career as much as your manager should help develop you. You've got to own it, right? There's nobody else that you can blame if you've been in an organization and kind of like you thought, oh, my career's not developed because nobody asked me, right? That's just not the right answer.
Yep, absolutely. I second what you're saying. The next question from Slido is, how would you say, what would you say are the key behaviors, skills that are at your foundation that have contributed to your success?
I think you broke it. Is it my Wi-Fi or yours? I'm not sure. Let me just.
It's
There you go. Let me try that. Is that any better?
Sorry, I think that I'm breaking up. The question was.
Well, you go for it. What was the question?
Do you want me to try to help with Christina breaking up a little bit?
Hey, Stacey.
Hey.
Yep, Stacey.
Yeah, no problem. So it says, hi, Roy, you touched on your values. What would you say are the key behaviors or skills that are at your foundation that have contributed to your success?
So I think I mean I think I touched on a few of these earlier on, but to try and recap, hopefully I don't say anything contradictory. But I think being personable, having a genuine interest in people, wanting to, like, once I realized I wasn't the smartest person in the room, kind of figuring out who the smartest people are and how do I build the best possible team. And I think sort of trying to build, it goes back to the point on diversity, trying to create a team that, like, you don't need this like 5 of the same people, like the diverse dynamics of the team create great teams. And then I think sort of understanding what your mission is. So I think I've always go back to my early days when I described my experience in Egg Bank when it was in the UK. I as a leader, I used to understand what was important to my boss, what was important to the organization, and what is it they need. And I think then if you confuse the, like, I really understand what I'm delivering, like, what does my boss view as success for me as an individual? Like, what are they looking for? How do I make them succeed so I can deliver the right outcomes for them? I can kind of build a great team and foster talent and creativity within the team. Then I think you've got a kind of a recipe for success. And not, I think, trying to get out of the detail. I struggle with this still all the time. It's one of my biggest flaws. But I think sort of letting the team breathe and letting them do what they need to do and not micromanaging, I think enables you to scale and do more and take on more, and allows the team to be successful as well.
Perfect. And it looks like Christina's back, so I'll let her continue.
Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, Stacey. The next question is, with such a large remit, how do you protect the time to give yourself headspace to create and deliver the vision of your team?
Well, it's by using the team. I mean, scale, I don't think is a challenge. I mean, you know, I was at Barclays. I kind of managed teams in Barclays of kind of 4,500, 5,000 people. I mean, the difference is when you get bigger teams, it's really hard to be personable. So you just can't remember everyone. Like 4,500 people in 6 different countries, it's very hard to meet everyone and connect with everyone on a personal level. So that creates a different dynamic, but ultimately all balls up to the same sort of thing. I mean, look, I've got now I've got Tom, who looks after all of our program stuff. He's an expert in that space. Mike looks after all of our production systems. Alan looks after all our security and risk. So I've got Mark, who looks after all of our application estate. And obviously now with Sujit moving on, Gerhard and Yvonne, who are kind of in there looking after the wallet and eCash, right? All of these individuals are highly skilled. So my ability to do my job is really down to sort of understanding and being clear with them. If I can be clear with them about what I need, it's like that sort of player manager, the coach. My job is not to run on to the football or the soccer. If you're in America, it's like, my job is not to run on and start kicking the ball in the net because the team aren't doing their job, right? It's not the coach can't run on kind of 30 minutes into the game and go, right, I think I can score the goal. That's not the coach's job. My job is to observe the team and to look at areas of strength and weakness and to kind of change the dynamics and change the agenda if we're not winning the game. That's my job, right? I have to stay in position as much as the team have to stay in position there. So I think that's, if I tried to run on and be the goalkeeper and the defender and the striker, it's like you haven't got enough energy for that. You just can't scale, right? You just can't win. So I think understanding your job as a leader is to kind of manage the dynamic and the interaction between the team. And that's no different if you're managing a team of 5 or you're a manager of managers. I guess the level of sort of detail that you go in is different and your subject matter is different, but the dynamics are the same.
And Roy, when building a strategy, what drives how much focus is given on disruptive, innovative change versus sustaining current performance?
Well, I think it's down to what are the needs of the business. So, I mean, there's no point we could disrupt in Paysafe and do all sorts of stuff, but if we're not making money and we're not growing, then it's pointless, right? It's just sort of, it's a bit like sometimes you hear a lot, like technology people build technology and they're like, well, I built this thing. It's like, why does nobody want it? Well, nobody wants it because you're not actually solving a real problem. So I think, look, our business is lucky that we're in a space that is disruptive. I mean, you think about what's happening with crypto and the metaverse and kind of online payments. There are many people disrupting in that space. So I think we're lucky that not disrupting is not an option for us, but we can't only focus on the disruptive stuff. So we've got to run the business and we've got to deliver the numbers and we've got to deliver the commitments to the market now, especially now we're a public company. So the deciding on whether you want to be disruptive or not, it's not the hard thing. I think for us, that with the world we're in is disruptive. The world of payments is disruptive, so we have to be. The question is how disruptive, where do you disrupt, right? So how can you disrupt? Like, can you genuinely be disruptive against competition? So disruptive is a big word, right? There's sort of disruptive up here and there's sort of disruptive, i.e. we're just sort of changing our business models a little bit. So I think for us, I mean, Paysafe, it's not like we're building a new product, like we're not disrupting the payments industry, i.e. we've got a new product that nobody else in the world has ever thought of, right? We're not at that end of the spectrum in terms of disruption or innovation, where we've built something new and it's going to take years to the innovation curve, where these things can take years to sort of curate and build up to something that's kind of mass market and global scale. We're not doing that. But we do have to be disruptive in the space that we're in, i.e. thinking about how we deploy new products and how do we compete, how do we stay ahead of our competition. That's our biggest challenge, which is kind of beating the competition, staying ahead, and providing new products and services quickly that allow merchants to interact and transact with the broadest possible checkout that they can have, and create relevant products in the consumer space. And we're in a very crowded market. I think it's very hard to do that all the time, and that's the constant challenge of this business, which is how do we stay ahead? How do we disrupt?
Thanks, Roy. And the last question from Slido is a bit more personal one. What was your trigger point to trust the guidance of your sponsors and go for larger roles versus continuing to ride the next tech wave?
So like, it happened quite early on in my career. So this was kind of like, you have those defining moments. Very early on in my career, as I talked about, I kind of went from being an individual contributor to an engineering manager and became successful. And I remember getting called into an office one day. So I walked into this office, my boss was sat there, and across the table was HR, and there was like an envelope on the table. And like immediately I knew what was happening. I was like, oh dear, this is it. Like the day has come where I'm no longer be working at this company. So, and actually it was completely opposite. What happened was they kind of said, look, great news. We're going to kind of be building a new office, and we're going to be rethinking the way that we develop software. We're kind of like going to be working in agile technologies and want to think differently, co-locate with the business. We want you to be the leader of this division. And I was like, wow, that's a big opportunity. So like I didn't feel I was ready for it. And then the realization hit me that some of the people that hired me that were at the time probably 15 to 20 years older than me, at least 15 years older than me, would be working for me. And I was like, oh, this is awkward, right? Like that I came in here and they were there, and like now we've flipped, right? This is really awkward. It took me so I remember I went home over the weekend. I came back on Monday and I sat down with my boss then and said, like, I can't accept this job. I just can't do it. I'm not at the right level. I'm not going to do it. Right? It's not me. And we had a long conversation. I remember we went for a big walk around the building and down by this river and back. And my boss convinced me that I could do it. I'd got the skills. I'd shown the potential. He'd seen the potential in me and did some Jedi mind trick on me and convinced me that I shouldn't hand in my notice and decline his offer, but I should do it. And that was a huge pivotal point in my career where it's kind of like I just felt massively in the deep end, out of my comfort zone. Somebody else had convinced me and pushed me and got the trust and confidence in me, and I trusted them. I knew them as an individual and knew they wouldn't be setting me up to fail. They're like it wouldn't have helped them. Like putting me in that role and me failing was not in their interest, because then they fail. So I knew that they would be doing this if they couldn't trust me. And then the rest is history. So I had to have a conversation with these individuals and say, look, this is awkward. Now you're working for me, and luckily they were all good with that. So we kind of moved forward, and then that was kind of I guess a big defining moment for leadership. Those individuals goes back to my earlier point. They pushed me way out of what was my comfort zone. The easy thing for me to do at that point would be say, no, I'm just kind of fine. Like, just leave me in the job I'm doing. I'm kind of cool with it. It's kind of I go home at 5:30 and I've done my technology stuff and it's fine. But they pushed me and pushed me and pushed me, and actually I enjoyed it. And I once I broke through that, there's been a couple of other breakthrough moments, but that was one of the big breakthrough moments for me in my career, where I really had to kind of step up and move forward and get past what was a level of almost like what a perceived glass ceiling for me that was not true.
I think that this answer is the perfect closure for today's session. For me personally, it was very insightful. I really hope that the rest are also finding all your answers in that way. And I would really, really love if we can repeat in some time a similar session and talk a bit more about the organization, leadership, and technology. Thank you, Roy. It was amazing evening today, and I hope we'll talk soon again.
No problem. Thank you for the questions. You're a phenomenal interviewer. So you made me work very hard. Thank you very much. And thanks all to everyone on the line. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.